All right. So I want to get started with a Sprint 13 demo. Marianne, do you have the slides?
Yeah, hold on. I got to share my desktop. Duh. Can you see it now?
Okay.
Good.
Yep. All right, so welcome to the Sprint 13 overview. Just want to give a status about what was accomplished here in this last sprint. Next slide, please.
Everybody go on mute.
Hold on a second, kids. I need to turn off my stuff.
Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so the sprint ended Monday night. There was a record 158 pull requests merged. As you can see, most of the stuff that the team has been doing has been focused on bugs. There's been a lesser number on enhancements and a pretty healthy number on refactoring and technical debt. Hopefully this next Sprint 14, I'm kind of hoping that we'll start shifting the content of the pull request to fewer bugs and kind of more enhancements. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who's going to tell us about the stuff that's been changed in the user interface.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, as Oleg said, there are a ton of bugs that we worked on during the sprint, but some of the key ones here were fixing the RBAC feature bugs, because I guess a lot of people have been trying to create custom roles, which something like you have a user and you want them to just see automate, for example. And some of our screens were not behind features, so you could not like give a person just automate, and some of them, they were just plain old bugs where we weren't checking the right features. So a lot of people were doing that, so we cleaned up a bunch of that. So now you should be able to create roles that are pretty custom, you know, with just about anything you can think of as far as our feature sets. In addition, last sprint, the cloud tenant CIs were made primary, you know, they got their own tab and everything. So we also found some places where the relationships weren't quite right, and we added that to like the instant summary screen, for example. I'll show a shot of that just so we can see where that is. There was some work done on cleaning up the service requests. A lot more people are using services, so when they go to look at their requests, the list and the detail views were not synced up. There was more information on one, and some of the headers were different, so we cleaned that up. With the cloud models, all the new cloud models put in last sprint and before that, we finally got around to adding all those cloud models to reporting. And then there's been some significant work done on converting all of our views to HAML, but there's a long way to go. But that's going to be an ongoing thing. We're converting them as we fix bugs in them. Plus, we have some guys in Brno doing work to convert as many as they can. So, next one. I see a little mouse moving. Okay, so here you can see in the relationships on the bottom left of the right-hand cell, see the relationships, you can see the cloud tenant, as well as the menus up on top where the clouds is selected. You have providers, availability zone, tenants, flavors, security groups. So those are all there. All the relationships are there. They're all clickable. So you should be able to navigate around all the cloud CIs pretty easily. If you find any that are missing, just let us know. I'm pretty sure we've covered most of them. Next. Okay, so this is the service request list. It used to be probably just a handful of fields going across. What we tried to do is put the most pertinent so you can see more information. And this was requested by the field, as a matter of fact, so that they could see at a glance a lot more information: who approved it, when it was created, when it was approved, things like that. So then if you carry that over into the next slide, basically the details will show the same information, a little bit more, but same information with the same headers and everything. I think before it was like created on, and one was on created on, and one was a created ad or something like that. So we cleaned all that up, but we also made sure that all the fields aligned and they all had the same wording and everything. Next. All right, so this is actually adding all of the cloud information to the cloud CIs to the reporting, and you can see there. I've got the cloud providers selected, but if you also notice, there's availability zones, flavors, cloud tenants, cloud resource quotas, security groups are down there as well. So those all show up now in there along with their relationships. So the next slide shows the relationships out of cloud providers, I think. Right, so there I had chosen the cloud providers, and you can see in the top box I've got flavors selected, but also in the bottom you can see I pulled in some things. You can get the tags, the tags and the availability zones and the cloud tenants. So we basically added cloud providers. We also, I didn't mention it on the last slide, but it was on there. We also added infrastructure providers. So now you can either go from providers, which will give you everybody, all the providers, and then you can either go cloud or infrastructure providers if you were reported specific to either one of those sides. And the relationships should be all clean from all of those. And I think that's all I got for UI.
Okay, so from the Automate side, one of the new models we exposed is the cloud resource quota. This is exposed through the provider, EMS Cloud, and through the cloud tenant. And then in the example data, you can see the main fields that you would probably access. So name, service name. I think there's another service name for, let's say, volume. That's also exposed, and then the value and the used value is a calculated value. So for something like provisioning, you can use this to do check quota against your OpenStack instance that you're provisioning to decide if you're within quota, if you want to approve or deny the provision request coming across. So I picked out just a couple of examples here to show instance. Thank you. So obviously value 16, we've used 5, so we have 11 instances available that we can use in the current quota here. So those kind of follow. I think some of them, the used value is not always available or it doesn't come back. So I don't know. I don't have an example of it here, but there were a couple of values that we don't calculate a used for. But you can see that the value that's defined in the OpenStack instance. So, yeah, so that's I think the only model that got exposed in this sprint for Automate. All right, next one. All right. So one of the things in our SCVMM integration, we did a lot of work to use PowerShell through the WinRM gem to talk to the remote systems. So while it's a relatively simple thing to do, some of the parsing coming back is not obvious. So we put a talk article up to allow people to easily understand how they can reuse that logic within Automate. I think the one thing that we want to update that article with, we were talking about this morning, was that we did run into an issue with the size of the script that you can pass. So we're going to clarify that in the talk article. What that really means is if you need to pass a really long script, you might need to do it in multiple invocations of the call. So that's just something to keep in mind if you do need to talk PowerShell to a remote system. But otherwise, that's pretty much gives you the ability to run any PowerShell script remotely on a Windows box that you've configured with WinRM. And for the import side, we demoed that last time, but the PR wasn't officially in at the end of last sprint, so that got merged in this sprint. The import used to be just an upload feature, and it would import whatever you sent up. So now you get to select currently down to the namespace. In this sprint, we have a PR that's being reviewed for this sprint, which will then go down to the class level, and you can select, upload your import, see what's there, select classes, and import them into multiple domains. All right, next. And so from the filtering, this is all the cloud side. Before we were not filtering the fields there, cloud network, security, groups, floating IPs based on the selected tenant. We've enhanced that to honor the tenant that you've selected, so you can only see the available items under that. And then for Amazon, you can see there, we've added 2 new columns that we collect during the EMS refresh. For the flavor and hardware, it goes back to the instance and image, so that we can determine better what flavors are available for the selected image that you're provisioning. So really, that just not much there, but we don't allow you to select flavors that are inappropriate for that, which before we weren't filtering that properly. Yep, next slide. And this is just showing the examples of the data pulling back. So the left is an instance, and right is an image showing the different root device types that we collect. So those are columns, they're reportable. One more slide. And then from the flavor view, seeing the block storage. So those values are all real columns, reportable, available to automate. And I think that's it. There's a little stuff later on in the slide deck, but if you want to go to the next slide, I think it changes the topic. Yeah.
Yep. So in this sprint, as was pointed out in the very beginning, there were a lot of bugs that were fixed. I'm going to try to focus more on some of the features that we've added for providers. This first one started out as a bug where we're not able to launch, we're not able to restart certain OpenStack VMs because their power state we were losing the raw power state from the provider. We were storing some calculated value that was supposed to normalize it across all the providers. But we realized that just wasn't going to work, especially with OpenStack, because they have a different kind of state machine with their instances. So we've kind of rolled that back, started storing the raw power state along with this calculated power state, so we can report on calculated as well as the raw power state. We did this across all the providers for all the instances. We didn't do this with hosts at this point because we haven't seen a problem on the infrastructure side for hosts, so it only affects instances and VMs for cloud and infrastructure providers. Next slide. And then on the cloud side, we're identifying the public templates in both OpenStack and Amazon. And what this means is that before we were collecting all the different templates from both providers, but we didn't differentiate in our database whether the template was actually public or private. And now we are. We're going to build a UI around that upcoming, so we can actually show to the users in CFME or in ManageIQ whether the template is public or private, and then also allow that to be shown through the provisioning process. And then Rich Oliveri added support for the non-admin users in EMS Refresh for OpenStack. And really what this means is that before we had a restriction where when you set up an OpenStack provider, you had to use an admin user. You had to provide admin credentials. So now we've opened that up a little bit, allowed non-admin credentials to be used. You can kind of play around a little bit more with being able to attach that user to different tenants on the OpenStack side. Gives the user a little bit more control over how they want to manage that relationship between ManageIQ and OpenStack. And then we also, Jason, do you want to talk a little bit about the provider region support you worked on?
Sure. So previously for Amazon to support regions, we were storing the region name in the host name column, kind of overloading that column. And that provides a problem when we want to do a similar thing on the OpenStack side where you actually have host names on OpenStack and I need to store a region. So we did some back-end cleanup of that to create a new column that only stores the region. And hopefully in the next sprint, we can get OpenStack region support that's analogous to Amazon.
Great. And I think that's it for the provider support that we've done for this sprint.
On the tenant support that you did, does that mean that if you're using a non-admin user, you will not see all of the extra things that the admin user sees, even if they don't have access to the tenant?
Right. So before we had some kind of lingering places where should we actually save questions to the end, maybe?
Either way.
Okay, I'll go ahead and enter this one. So before, because we had an admin user, we were relying on the fact that user was admin and had some kind of some workarounds that are available in the way in which we connect to OpenStack to be able to get different types of data. Once we removed that and started allowing non-admin users to connect, it cleaned up a lot of the ways in which we connect and grab data from OpenStack so that we're not relying on ways in which we can say, get all the information across all different tenants and then kind of sort it out once we get it. We're saying, give me the information that's only available in the tenants that this user has access to. It gives, it makes that relationship a little bit cleaner between ManageIQ and OpenStack. And I think it really just provides more options for users on how they want to build those connections. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Next up is the console. Next up is the console and the rate test.
Yeah, so the first one, relatively self-explanatory there, but we basically put in a rate test to allow you.
You have a microphone on?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll turn mine off.
All right. A test to allow you to drain the backlog of replication items so that before you do any type of migration on the database. Obviously, this is generally used in upgrade scenario where you need to get that stuff moved before we do any changes to the database. So we've implemented a rate test that allows you to do that, provides feedback while it's running. That's really about it for that one. I think Keenan has the Black Console piece.
I do have a little video, or I can talk. Is there something people would prefer? Cool. Feedback when everybody's on mute. Okay. Actually, yeah, why don't I just run through this quickly. I'm going to try and steal your screen. Marion. Is that coming across? Oh.
Yep.
I hope it does. Thanks. Cool.
It's coming through.
So I set up two different appliances that we're hooking up together. I have a Master 3, which is going to hold the database. And in here, you can actually go into option 8 and set up a custom encryption key. I'll show option 4, you can do host name. But right here, you just fill in a couple of fields. So I decided, heck, let's show you guys the more advanced way. So if you go into option F3 to go into a shell prompt, you also have the ability to set up an encryption key, and the appliance console CLI, you can just ask for help and go from there. Now I'm going to pause because I just realized something. What is the key? So high level, the encryption key is what we are using to encrypt our provider's passwords and some other data that is private. And right now, when we ship our appliance, we give a default out-of-the-box key to individuals. And the work I did today is this sprint is it allows you to actually go in and tell the appliance console that I'd like to go ahead and generate a key. And so you just generate a key, and that's all you had to do. Now, the database already had values in it that were encrypted using the key, specifically the session password. So we do need to go in and we need to use another tool, which promise you next sprint I will get into the appliance console. But there's something called fix auth, and that will allow us to handle invalid keys. This one says if you see an invalid key, just do bogus. And I did --v2 to say go ahead and upgrade any v2 keys to make sure they're there. Because in essence, when we did --key, we regenerated a new encryption key, and the old one's no longer valid. So there is, I found out last night at 3 o'clock, there is a slight bug in that script that we just ran here. So I will have a PR in for that tomorrow. But the reason why I am demoing is to show you that here, this is a second appliance. Notice IP address 148, and I call this other. And from this appliance, you would like to hook up to the master appliance, the one we just saw. We would like to fetch those keys, and we'd also like to point our database at the other one. So in essence, we're setting up clustering. And so I just decided just to go to the appliance console CLI. You can do all of this from the regular appliance console. And that's just menu driven, so it's pretty easy. So I didn't think I would need to demo that. This is a typo; it should have been host there. But so on this host, we're going to go ahead and tell it, hey, by the way, 147 is the master 3 appliance. That's going to be the appliance that has the database. Now we ship them with a database on all appliances, but this is a procedure you would go ahead and use to say, let's just fetch those keys and then let's point to an external database. So here we're going to fetch the key, and that goes ahead and actually gets our encryption key. So now we have set up trust between these two boxes, and they have an encryption key to encrypt passwords. And this database, unless you get these keys off these two boxes, nobody else can really use or access the database. And then we're going to tell this appliance, normally, again, they're set up with their own database. Right here, we're just going to tell the command line, hey, here's an external database. Could you please configure it? So now the two databases are hooked up together. So since we changed the database configuration, we're going to go ahead and restart EVM server. Now, I was a little impatient when I was recording the video, and so I thought it wasn't working, but sure enough, patience does pay off. So if you go ahead and log in to the appliance console on the other box, you can see that the EVM database is not other1, the name of this box, but it's actually master 3. So we do have two appliances networked together, and with custom encryption keys. And this, both of our machines, this is our master database, and this is our alternate appliance with a UI worker on it, and they're both set up to point to the same machine. So I think that's all we have today. I'm not sure if I gave enough background, so I'm not sure if I lost too many people. But yep. Any questions? I'll take that as a no. Thanks.
Okay, so this sprint we were working on Ruby 2.0, trying to get to a point where we can upgrade our appliances and be able to use Ruby 2.0. So the first thing was setting up a pull request that we can take advantage of Travis to continually test against existing Ruby 193 and also 2.0. So this pull request 185 is the one that was the staging ground for all the changes that have been coming down. And now we're actually at all green on Ruby 2.0. And the reason why the title of the slide has Ruby 2x is that we're now down to only one test failure on Ruby 2.1, so we're able to keep track that the upgrade to 2.1 wouldn't be too difficult either. So what's done so far is that we've set up a CentOS appliance with Ruby 2.0 manually installed, and I was able to test some basic reporting, VM scanning, fleecing, and some VMware inventory, and that all works. Then there's a lot of existing crutches where we were doing migration stuff in the past, so a lot of the various patches were verified, deleted, or fixed. And there are lots of other fixes, and I have the URL here. We can take a look at. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the remaining items. The primary one that seems to be the most widespread is that by default, Ruby 2.0 reads Ruby scripts in UTF-8 encoding. So any place we had binary strings that would not be able to be compatible in UTF-8, we would have issues. So there's many that are fixed, but there's still many remaining. I also have to look at automating the build of Ruby 2.0 on the CentOS appliance, upgrading developers, and putting together some information on how you would do that with the existing documentation. Look at existing non-Rails gems. For example, the Postgres gem, the PG gem, is very old. I'm not sure if anything will give us problems in regards to Ruby 2.0 and going forward with some of these old gems. And again, another link to some of the outstanding Ruby 2.0 issues. Next slide, please. Finally, in the midst of doing all this, there were some sporadic tests that were failing with the killed message on Travis. And while we were looking at some other issue, we found that some of our tests were disabling the garbage collector. And so depending on when the test that was disabling the garbage collector would run, you would actually kill the machine because you would just blow out memory. So we were able to find those, detect those, and get rid of many of them. There's a few more remaining, so we still have some work there. That's it. Next slide.
Okay. Right. In this sprint, Jerry had his pull request for XFS file system support merged. So now we support XFS. Mo is still working on the REFS work, which is unfortunately not open source. So it's much harder to glean what's going on under the covers for the Microsoft stuff. And I think Jerry has a demo of us fleecing an XFS-based VM. So George can do that.
Sure. I have a short video I'm going to show. And what's your modified before? Yeah. Can I just run it right out of the BlueJeans, or should I share my desktop and show my own?
Try running it out of BlueJeans.
Well, Jerry's setting up.
Oh, here we go.
While Jerry's setting up, XFS is the default file system on RHEL 7. That's one of the reasons why we focused on it. Now that RHEL 7 is used. And we have the other one, I think, and one of those. So it's not the default yet.
Okay, so we're going to log into clients here. Going to look for our VMs that we have in our infrastructure, and I'm going to look for a specific VM that I know that's got RHEL 7 and XFS on it, and select that. And actually, this is the console for the VM. You can see that the file systems in the round table are actually XFS there. The boot and the root are XFS. And then if you look at the detail for the VM in Manage IQ, we can see that there are no disks, and no packages, no users, and it doesn't know anything about the file system. We haven't had tweaks on this anymore. We haven't much analysis before, so now we're going to go ahead and select the VM and perform SmartC analysis on it. And then we're going to go look at our test status and watch it happen in a time machine, so it's much faster than normal. We'll go through the different steps here. You can see that we're starting the scan. It's scanning the metadata. And it should show up the software. And that should move my screen a little bit so you can see it. And it's complete. Deleting the snapshot. And we've successfully completed. Now if you select that and go back to the detail for the VM, you should see information about everything that we just found. And we do. We can see that the operating system is there, and we've got user groups and packages and disks. And I actually went down and drill down on these. You can see the disks and the packages and users. And that's it.
Very good.
I was on, but I didn't stop.
There you go on mute.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? So the reason that we did the XFS file system is because RHEL 7, which recently shipped, that's the default file system for RHEL 7. So now we can basically fleece RHEL 7 VMs in any environment with this new XFS support. That's really cool. On to security. I think we already talked about encryption keys on multiple appliances. Next slide, please, for the single sign-on stuff that Alberto will go. Alberto, I'm going to go on mute. You want to take the microphone?
Okay. Alrighty. So what was done in this sprint is essentially the extension of our IPA integration, where before you can log in with the IPA credentials on the UI, but here we've extended it so that we honor Kerberos authentication through the browser. So we've added that in this sprint. So SSO is available when you enable external authentication. So that gets configured against IPA. So the Kerberos is configured with the IPA server. We enhance the appliance console to do all that configuration magic behind the scene. There's also, I'll demo that later, there's also a new UI check mark so that you can, even though it's configured for external for Kerberos authentication, but you can also enable or disable the SSO behavior. And when you log out, you can go back in as as other credentials. So let's jump into the demo. Marianne, can you? Well, actually, I could do that. I could just start the. Really? Haven't tested it. All right, I'll do another way for now. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna talk through this.
I think you need to press the space bar for the microphone.
Huh? Talk closer.
No, it's not. We're not on that.
Oh. Yeah.
It's on now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So this is the latest install. So what we're showing here is configuring through the appliance console. As you see, external authentication is not enabled. So there's no change in using this. So you still go ahead and configure the IPA server. Here pointing to my IPA server on my test realm. Going forward with that. Okay, so proceeding this down. Okay, so again, the precursor to this, you got to make sure your the DNS is probably configured and time syncing is properly enabled. So these are all the prereqs that are there before for the IPA configuration. So that hasn't changed. So this is about 20. There we go. So the additional thing you'll see here, we additionally configure the IPA HTTP service and get the proper key tab for Kerberos authentication from the IPA server. So that was added here, and we're done. So you see external authentication configured for IPA server. So next we'll go in the web UI, because right now it's standard database configuration. We're going to enable external authentication. So over here and external. There we go. So you'll notice the new checkmark enable single sign-on. We won't try this for now. So this is the current behavior. Let's see if you try to go in. So now we have IPA enabled, and reloading the page doesn't do any SSO, and blank field is the same behavior as today. Name is required. So we're going in with an IPA credential. That's a user defined on the IPS server. Okay, we are in. So that's what we had before. So now we're gonna go ahead and enable SSO. So we'll enable this guy, save it. Okay. So when you hit a page, the main page, it will attempt an SSO. Now we got an error here. And again, if you click login with no user credentials, it will also attempt the SSO. Now I don't have any Kerberos credentials, so I'm gonna do the kinit to get ticket in. And there we go, coming from my test server. And we're just logging in without entering username or password. We're in. And as you can see, we've honored the username and group information from the server. And as you notice, also just reloading the page will go in via SSO, which is what we wanted. Now, when you log out, you have a choice. You can also come in. You want to go in as an admin to do some additional testing. So you have the ability to do that. You can also log out and log in with another IPA account. I'm logging in here as Keenan, and there you are. So even though my Kerberos ticket is for A Bellotti, I can get in as another account for testing purposes or what have you. So let's destroy my ticket, and again, the SSO is not honored. If I get a ticket for Keenan and I attempt it, that would be honored. Yeah, there's Keenan Brock. So that's, what else did I do? Yeah, and you could just get a different ticket for Kerberos and attempting the SSO, and that's the new feature that was added. So I think that's it for the demo.
Thanks, Alberto.
Yep.
Want to go on mute?
Okay.
Okay, next slide.
One more.
Should be another slide. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'll talk about some of the changes I made to testing in the last sprint. So I broke it up into two PRs. The first PR was merged, and the main focus on it was kind of revamping our testing to get away from focusing on cruise control so much and focusing on Travis. So previously we had one monolithic rake task at the root of the code base. So in order to test VMDB, you had to CD into the root, which is kind of weird because you're used to being in VMDB, and you had to run rake test VMDB from there, and it would do this whole thing where it reset your database and raked it up, and lots of output on the screen. Is kind of really hard to follow. And for Travis, it just presented as one huge blob in their UI. So what I did was I changed that so that in the VMDB directory, there's individual rake tasks for each of the different pieces, and they only do the testing part. There's a separate rake task for running setup. And that way, Travis can run, first it can run your setup, then it can run your rake task. And what's nice about that is Travis, for each command, I guess you can say, that you tell Travis to run, when it completes it, it can roll it up and shrink it so that it doesn't take up the screen. And you can twist it back down if you need to see it, but for the most part, you don't need to see it. One of the big changes that I broke out as well was Bundler. So Travis, when it runs bundle, it uses its own bundle. So in order to do that, we had to allow Bundler to be upgraded to the latest. So Bundler and Rake, now you can use the latest Bundler and Rake if you want and get the benefits of those. If you still have the old Bundler 135 that we were using previously, it will still work. On Travis, they use, I think, Bundler 162, which gives nice output. And the other thing that it has built in is retries. It also has the ability to download multiple gems at the same time. So hopefully that should speed up the tests a little bit because it can do, I think, up to 3 gems downloading at the same time. And then presentation-wise, once all of the gems have been downloaded, it collapses up into one line, so you don't have to actually look at it all the time. In addition, you have color up there now, so now the errors actually jump out at you. You can actually see the problems. And overall, completely optimized for Travis. For developers, locally, if you want to run the same test Travis is running, just CD into VMDB and bundle exec rake test VMDB or test metrics. If you need to do the setup, it's test:/setup_VMDB, and that will drop your database and recreate it. There's a corresponding setup task for every single test task that we have. In addition, I added default rake tasks. Many people want to just do bundle exec rake or rake spec. You can do that now, and it'll default to test VMDB by default. Know that there are still other test suites that will be run when you upload to Travis, so you don't get the full test coverage if you do this. But most people want to run VMDB, so this is what has been asked for. I have a second pass at cleanup in upstream has not been merged yet. We were trying to get it in for this sprint, but we're having a little problems with our cruise control systems. The point of that one is to completely remove the brake tasks at the root. So they're still there, so that our current cruise control systems don't die, but they're going to go away completely. And we're going to have our internal cruisers just rely on this kind of CD, VMDB kind of dial. The other thing I've changed is in the first pass, I don't have it written on the slide, but the setup tasks, for example, for VMDB is test:/setup_VMDB. I've switched that around a little bit, and now it's test:/VMDB:/setup. When that gets merged in, that's how you'll be able to do setup tasks. Hopefully this workflow is a lot easier for developers, and so far I've seen a lot of positive feedback on the Travis side because it's so much easier to follow and see what's going on. So that's about it.
Is there a procedure somewhere we can reference?
So I have a talk, ManageIQ talk post I've put together. I haven't posted it yet, so I'll put that out there. I think I'm going to put together a blog post as well because I think this is important enough to everybody understands how the testing can be done in a simpler fashion.
Cool. Very good. So I think that's all we have to show for the sprint. I thought it was a very solid and good sprint. Any questions or comments from anyone listening?
I have a question on the IDM. So you're honoring the Kerberos tickets. If somebody had IDM configured to talk to Active Directory, would an Active Directory Kerberos ticket be valid as well? Is it using IDM that way?
Alberto?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure about the Kerberos directly to AD, but the configuration of the appliance is to the IPA server. So if IDM is authenticating with ID on the back end, might still work, but it'll have to be tested.
Yeah, thank you. That's going to be the most common thing in the field, that AD.
Was that a question, Brad? I'm sorry.
No, I was just commenting that AD is going to be the most common thing that folks will do. Most people aren't going to be using the IPA server directly for their users and groups. They would be authenticating AD to IDM, and we would expect to see the pass through of the Kerberos ticket and the groups and stuff.
Yeah, so if it's going to be supported by IPA, I think the intention is that ManageIQ will support it as well. I guess we just have not validated that use case, but it's just something that we would have to validate. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. If there's nothing else, I'd like to close out this sprint demo. Thanks everyone for their hard work, and thank you everybody for coming to join this sprint review. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.